Have you ever been scrolling online? You see some headline that sounds absolutely wild, maybe, I don't know, a public figure doing something totally unbelievable, and just for a split second you feel it.
Hmm.
That little jolt of, wow, before your brain catches up and goes, hang on, no way.
Yeah, that moment.
That brief flicker of acceptance, that moment of almost being fooled, that's exactly what we're diving into today. Because deception, whether it's big financial fraud or those really subtle business tactics, it's everywhere, and it feels like it's growing.
It really does. It's kind of pervasive. Our deep dive today, it's based on this fantastic book that really takes apart why we get taken in. It looks at how our normal, usually helpful ways of thinking can actually be, well, exploited by people trying to mislead us.
Right. So our mission here for this deep dive is really to give you some tools, some insights to spot deception and hopefully avoid it. We want to help you become a more vigilant, more critical thinker.
And this is key without making you completely distrust everyone, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, not becoming overly cynical.
Yeah. Okay, so let's unpack this. One of the first big habits of thinking, a real cognitive blind spot the book talks about, is our natural focus. We tend to zone in on what's right in front of us,
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we often just completely miss crucial information that isn't there. And that leaves us, well, pretty vulnerable to manipulation.
Yeah. A key insight here is how figures like psychic mediums really exploit this. Take someone like John Edward.
Oh, yeah, I remember his shows.
Right. He'd be on stage throwing out these incredibly vague details like, where's Robert Robbie Rob? And our connection.
Right.
Or maybe mentioning a bone issue.
Super vague.
Totally. And then when someone in the audience inevitably connects that, oh, my father Robert had bone cancer, it feels like this amazing specific hit.
Right. Like he knew.
Exactly. But what you miss, what you don't focus on, is how easily a different answer could have fit, or how many other vague things he said that just landed flat, went unacknowledged.
You're absolutely right. It reminds me of the birthday paradox.
Yeah. If you're in a room and find out someone shares your birthday, it feels like this incredible coincidence.
Right, like lottery odds.
But if there are just 23 people in that room, the odds are actually better than 50-50 that two people share a birthday. We focus on that one amazing match, our own birthday, and forget all the other pairs that didn't match.
That's a great analogy. Edward succeeds because we naturally highlight the hits and completely ignore the huge number of misses. He's basically giving himself hundreds of chances to seem right.
So this tendency, focusing on what's there, neglecting what's missing. The book gives that powerful WWII example, right? The Where's Wald plane diagram.
Yes, that's a classic. During the war, engineers were looking at the B-17 bombers that came back from missions. They mapped out where the bullet holes were.
Okay, makes sense.
And their first instinct was, okay, let's put extra armor where we see all the damage.
Which seems logical. Protect the vulnerable spots.
But Abraham Wald, this statistician, he had this completely counterintuitive insight. He said, no, don't reinforce the damaged areas, reinforce the areas where there's no damage.
Wait, why? That sounds backward.
Because of the planes he was looking at were the ones that survived and came back. The bullet holes showed where a plane could get hit and still fly.
Ah, okay.
The planes that didn't come back, they were likely hit in those other places, the ones that were unmarked on the surviving planes. Those were the fatal spots.
That's the missing information.
Exactly. The data from the planes that didn't return was missing, and that was the crucial part.
Wow. That's a perfect example of survivorship bias, isn't it?
Textbook.
We focus only on the successes, the survivors, and we completely ignore the failures, the ones that didn't make it. You see this even today. Like the book mentions a podcaster, Dave Rubin, claiming he knew lots of people who regretted getting the vaccine, but none who regretted not getting it.
Mm-hmm. And regardless of your views on vaccines, that framing immediately makes you think.
Yeah, what information is missing there? What about all the people who got sick or worse because they didn't get it?
Right.
Or people who got it and were fine?
Precisely. It just prompts you to always ask,
Yeah.
What am I not seeing here? What's the other side of this data?
So, okay, how do we fight this tendency, this natural blind spot? The book talks about a tool, right? The possibility grid.
Yeah, it's a really powerful, simple idea.
Yeah.
It just forces you to consciously consider all four potential outcomes for any situation.
Mm.
So you tried something and succeeded.
Okay, top left box.
Right. Tried it and failed. Didn't try it, but succeeded anyway.
Interesting.
And didn't try it and failed. You need all four to really understand cause and effect.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about the Hush Puppies marketing story. The anecdote goes that, hipsters in the East Village started wearing them and suddenly the brand took off again.
Yeah, I've heard that one. Classic turnaround.
But If you apply the possibility grid, you realize you're only hearing about the tried-succeeded box, assuming they were actively targeting hipsters, which is debated. But to know if that strategy caused the success, you need to know. Did other shoe companies try similar niche marketing and fail?
Right, the tried-failed box.
Did other struggling brands not target hipsters and see a resurgence anyway? Maybe due to broader fashion trends? That's the didn't try succeeded box.
Or didn't try and failed, which is probably most companies.
Exactly. Without that full picture, the hipster story is just an anecdote, not proof of a winning strategy.
And it's not just marketing, right? There's that stock picker example, Mr. Pink Shirt.
Oh, yeah. His ads boasted he picked Amazon back in '97 and Tesla in '11. Sounds amazing.
Like a genius. Get his next pick.
But again, that's just the top left box, his two big winners. You have to ask,
Yeah.
what about all the other stocks he picked over those 14 years that bombed?
The tried-failed box again.
And what about the huge winners, like Google or Facebook,
Yeah.
that he didn't pick? The didn't try succeeded box, from his perspective. Suddenly, 2 hits in 14 years doesn't seem quite so impressive when you see the whole grid.
It really changes the perspective.
And the bigger point is that, businesses, social media, even politicians are constantly using this kind of focus hacking. They show you only the shiny success story.
Like the Nikola truck video.
Perfect example. Look like a working hydrogen-powered truck cruising down the highway. Turned out, they just rolled an engineless prototype down a hill.
Seriously?
But the Volkswagen emission scandal. The cars were programmed to run clean only during testing conditions. On the road, totally different story. They showed regulators one box, the clean one, and hid the dirty one.
So what's the takeaway for us here? This curated reality is everywhere, designed to mislead.
And here's a really important kind of subtle point the book makes. Social discomfort often stops us asking the critical questions. Imagine being at that John Edwards show. Would you actually stand up and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Edward, could you list all the predictions you made tonight that didn't land?"
No, probably not. That would be awkward.
Exactly. Or think about Theranos. Investors saw these demos, but apparently some were null protocols, just pre-recorded results or simulations. Asking tough questions, demanding real proof, felt uncomfortable, confrontational.
And people didn't ask, and they lost billions.
Right. So sometimes the absence of information, like a missing explanation for how a supposed success happened, or a lack of verifiable data, that absence is evidence. Evidence that something might be wrong.
That's a powerful thought. Absence is evidence.
And one actionable thing the book suggests is to cultivate your own resume of failure. We'll focus on our successes, right?
Sure, on LinkedIn, everywhere.
But consciously tracking what didn't work out, the jobs you didn't get, the projects that failed, the ideas that flopped, that gives you a much more complete, honest picture of your own performance. It helps you see your own possibility grid.
Okay, that's focus. Now, building on that, let's talk about prediction. This is another cognitive blind spot, right? We rely on our experiences to predict things, and we tend to accept info that confirms our predictions without much scrutiny.
Yeah, we kind of expect to be surprised when things go wrong or when something unexpected happens. But we often don't expect to be surprised when things seem to go right or confirm what we already thought. We just nod along.
And this isn't just individuals, right? Even big institutions fall for this. The book mentions the Dan Rather 60 Minutes memo controversy.
Right. A really respected news organization aired this story based on documents about George W. Bush's National Guard service that turned out to be unauthenticated, likely forgeries.
Okay.
And the subsequent internal report admitted to things like myopic zeal and a rigid and blind defense of the story. The question is, why were they so ready to believe it, to run with it so strongly?
Because it fit their narrative,
Yeah.
what they expected or perhaps wanted to find.
That's what the analysis suggests. It matched their predictions, their existing storyline, so the critical scrutiny maybe wasn't as intense as it should have been. Again, we're just looking at the cognitive process described.
And what about that viral mask infographic during COVID, the Wall Street Journal one?
Oh, I remember that one. It had these super precise hours of protection figures for different masks.
Yeah, like N95s give you exactly X hours.
And the book notes that even quantitatively savvy people were sharing it widely. Why? Because the conclusion that N95s were highly effective matched their predictions.
But the math was way off, right?
Totally nonsensical. Like they just multiplied filtration percentages by 15 minutes or something arbitrary. But it looked precise, it looked scientific, and it confirmed what people already believed about N95, so they didn't dig into the calculations.
Wow. That's confirmation bias meeting prediction.
Exactly. And this gets amplified by something called motivated numeracy.
Motivated numeracy.
Yeah, it's where our deep-seated beliefs, especially political ones, can actually override our basic logical or mathematical reasoning skills.
How does that work?
There are studies mentioned in the book where people were given data, say, about crime rates and handgun bans. Their ability to correctly interpret that data depended heavily on whether the conclusions supported their existing political views on gun control.
So if the data seemed to support their view, they could interpret it fine.
More likely to, yes. But if the same data, presented slightly differently, led to a conclusion that challenged their view, their ability to interpret it correctly often plummeted. Their reasoning was motivated by their beliefs. Same thing happened with interpreting a simple logical syllogism about, say, Marxist advisors. Logic took a backseat to political alignment.
That's kind of scary, actually. Our beliefs literally blinding us to data.
It shows how powerful these prediction biases are, which leads to a really interesting tool the book brings up, Benford's Law.
Benford's Law. Okay, what's that? Sounds mathematical.
It is, but it's fascinatingly simple. It basically says that in many naturally occurring sets of numbers, think company revenues, populations of towns, lengths of rivers, even social media followers, the leading digits aren't evenly distributed.
Meaning not 1 through 9 appearing equally often.
Exactly. The digit 1 appears as the first digit about 30% of the time. 2 appears about 17, 18% of the time, and so on down to 9, which appears less than 5% of the time.
Huh. That's weird. Why?
It relates to logarithmic scales, basically how numbers grow proportionally.
Yeah.
But the cool part is its application.
Okay.
Deviations from Benford's Law can be a huge red flag for fraud, especially in accounting. If someone is just making up sales figures, they probably won't naturally follow this distribution. They might avoid too many round numbers, but getting the first digits right, according to Benford, unlikely.
So auditors can use this.
Absolutely. It's a standard tool. And it's not just finance. The book mentions Jennifer Goldbach, a social network expert who used it to detect bot networks. She found that follower accounts for real human accounts tend to follow Benford's Law. But bot networks, their follower accounts often don't because they aren't generated by natural organic growth. By looking at the follower accounts of the accounts that the bots themselves followed, she could spot patterns inconsistent with Benford's Law, helping identify the fake networks.
That's ingenious, using a mathematical law to spot fake accounts.
It really is. It's this unexpected signal hidden in the numbers, showing that when something doesn't match a natural pattern, it might be artificial or manipulated.
So it's another way our expectations can be useful, but also need checking. We expect natural data to behave a certain way, and when it doesn't, that's a clue.
Precisely. We need to question information, especially when it just feels too neat or perfectly confirms what we already thought.
All right, that takes us neatly into the third cognitive blind spot commitment. This is the idea that once we commit to an assumption or a belief, we rarely go back and reconsider it. And that makes us vulnerable to some pretty wild deceptions.
It really does. The Mandela effect is such a strange, perfect example of this.
Yeah, where people misremember things collectively.
Exactly. Like huge numbers of people vividly remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison back in the 1980s.
When he actually died in 2013.
Right. Or people absolutely certain the children's book characters were the Berenstain Bears with an E-N.
But it's always been Berenstain with an A-N.
Always. But here's the commitment part. Rather than just accept that memory is imperfect, that it can distort things over time, some people become so committed to the infallibility of their own memory
that they invent crazy explanations.
they adopt these, as the book calls them, outlandish belief systems, alternate realities, glitches in the matrix, forked timelines, anything to avoid concluding their memory simply made a mistake. Their commitment to their memory's accuracy is absolute.
Wow. That's commitment overriding simple explanations. And this happens in the real world too, right? With less cosmic stuff?
Absolutely. The book talks about the shock many people apparently felt when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
Even though there were warnings for months, troops massing, intelligence reports.
Right. But many people seemed unwittingly committed to the assumption that Russia wouldn't actually invade. Maybe it felt too irrational, too disruptive to the world order they assumed existed. They couldn't easily update that core commitment, even with evidence piling up.
It's like that Harold Camping example, too, the guy who predicted the rapture.
Yes. His followers were so committed to the belief that the world was ending and money would be worthless that when offered a choice between $5 now or $500 after the predicted and failed rapture date, they chose the $5.
Because the $500 would be useless in the post-rapture world they were committed to believing in.
Exactly. Their commitment locked them into that choice, even when it seemed irrational from the outside.
So how do deceivers leverage this? Magicians seem like experts here.
Oh, master illusionists are brilliant at exploiting commitment.
Hmm.
People like James Ferrandi or Johnny Thompson, they understood this deeply.
How so?
They don't usually tell you, say, this box is empty. They show you it's empty. They let you see inside. And by doing that, they get you to commit to the assumption that the box is empty. And crucially, that all other conditions remain unchanged unless they draw attention to them.
So you assume nothing else tricky is happening while you focus on the empty box part.
Precisely. Think about Harry Harden's princess card trick. The magician has you pick a card, say the Queen of Hearts. He removes it, shows it to you. Then he puts the rest of the deck aside. He makes the queen vanish. Where did it go? Back in the deck.
Okay, standard trick.
But the method relies on your commitment. When he removes your queen, you assume the rest of the deck he puts aside still contains the original remaining cards. You commit to that assumption without realizing it.
But maybe it doesn't.
Exactly. The trick might involve switching the deck or having duplicates. By guiding your focus and letting you make assumptions, the magician systematically eliminates all the plausible explanations in your mind until the only thing left seems to be magic.
They guide your assumptions without ever stating them. Clever.
Very. They leverage the commitments you make.
So why is understanding this important for us, beyond magic tricks?
Because these commitments, especially strong interpersonal ones, can keep major frauds going for years. Think Bernie Madoff.
People trusted him completely. He was part of their community.
Right. That deep trust, that commitment to him being legitimate, blinded many victims to warning signs and allowed the Ponzi scheme to last for decades.
And it's not just trust in people, right? The book talks about commitments to ideas or systems.
Yeah, these common, often unexamined, unwise commitments, like blindly trusting that anything labeled peer-reviewed must be scientific truth.
Which lets people like Diederik Stapel get away with fraud.
Exactly. He was the Dutch social psychologist who just faked data from scratch for dozens of papers. His results often fit what experts expected to see, confirming their own theoretical commitments so they pass peer review easily.
Wow.
Or committing to the idea that dashboard data is reality without questioning how it's collected or if it can be gamed.
Like the Columbia University ranking scandal.
Perfect example. They were committed to getting a high rank in the U.S. News and World Report. So they submitted dubious figures, like counting billions in patient care as instructional spending. The ranking system committed to trusting the university's numbers, and the university exploited that. People commit to the idea that results aren't being gamed, and that's often a mistake.
So we need to be aware of our hidden assumptions, the things we're committed to without even realizing it.
Definitely. Questioning those underlying commitments is crucial.
Okay, so we've looked at how our minds are wired in ways that make us susceptible. Focus, prediction, commitment. Now let's flip it. How do deceivers actively exploit these things? The book lays out several common hooks, starting with efficiency.
Right. This is about our natural drive to conserve mental energy. We want to do the minimum cognitive work necessary to get by. We avoid exhaustive investigation if we can.
We take shortcuts.
Exactly. And con artists, manipulators, they know this. They rely on us not digging too deep. But the good news, the book argues, is that often overcoming this just means asking one more good question.
Okay, like in those chess cheating scandals.
Yeah, those are fascinating examples. Back in 1993, this unrated player, John von Neumann, no relation to the famous mathematician, was suddenly playing like a grandmaster.
How did they suspect cheating?
The tells weren't just surprisingly good moves. It was things like his move times being too consistent, almost robotic, or sometimes taking way too long on obvious, simple moves.
Suggesting he was waiting for computer input.
That was the suspicion. Years later, another case, Grandmaster Igor Zaraussis. His tell was a sudden meteoric rise in his ratings late in his career, in his 50s, which is almost unheard of for humans.
So not impossible moves, but an impossible pattern of improvement.
Right. And how was he caught? Someone saw him using his phone in the bathroom during a tournament. But with von Neumann earlier, the tournament director, Bill Goichberg, used a simple efficiency test.
He do.
He just gave von Neumann a basic checkmate puzzle, something any decent player should solve quickly. Von Neumann couldn't solve it.
That one extra question, that simple test, cut through the illusion.
Exactly. It bypassed the complex game analysis and tested a basic competency he should have had.
It's like, shrouded attributes and opportunity costs in buying things.
Yeah, that's another way our desire for efficiency gets exploited. Companies hide the true cost of things. Think printer ink.
Oh, yeah. The printer's cheap, the ink costs a fortune.
Or bank fees, hidden subscription charges, even the long-term cost of home maintenance.
Right.
These shrouded attributes make the initial price seem more attractive because we don't efficiently calculate the total cost of ownership.
And opportunity costs.
That's about what you give up when you make a choice. The book cites a study where college students were choosing between two stereos, one basic for $1,000, one fancier for $700. Most initially chose the fancier, cheaper one.
Makes sense.
But when the researchers simply added a phrase reminding them that choosing the $700 stereo would leave them with $300 in cash left over.
Ah, highlighting the opportunity cost of not choosing the cheaper one.
Precisely. Suddenly, a lot more students switched to the more expensive basic stereo. They just needed that one extra piece of information, the opportunity cost made explicit, to overcome their initial, less efficient comparison.
So just making the hidden visible.
Right. Art forgery is another great example here. The Noodler Gallery scandal involved millions in fake paintings attributed to artists like Rothko and Pollock.
And experts were fooled.
For years. Because the forgeries apparently looked correct. They had the right style, the right feel. They weren't revealed by someone saying that doesn't look like a Rothko.
How were they caught then?
Through inefficiency, essentially.
Yeah.
By people willing to ask more questions and dig deeper. Through physical analysis of the material's pigments that didn't exist when the artist was alive. Or documentary analysis of the provenance, the ownership history, which turned out to be fabricated.
So not just looking at the surface, but opening more doors.
Oh. Exactly. The book uses the analogy of a movie set. From the front, it looks like a real building. But you have to be willing to open the doors, peek behind the facade to see if it's real or just plywood. How many doors are you willing to open to verify something? How much inefficiency will you tolerate?
That makes sense. And what about that fake orchestra story?
Oh, the Tim Janis Ensemble. This group got bookings, positive press, playing music that sounded like, the Titanic soundtrack. Big, lush, orchestral sound.
Okay.
Turns out, the musicians on stage were largely miming along to pre-recorded tracks.
Seriously, like lip syncing, but with instruments.
Pretty much. And the fascinating part the book points out is the media's complicity, often just calling them an orchestra without question. It highlights how easily audiences, and even journalists, can fail to ask basic questions when something sounds good or fits expectations. Surely someone must have noticed the sound wasn't actually coming from the instruments.
You'd think so. It requires not being efficient, actually listening critically.
Right, so the actionable insight here is really to arm yourself with a few good probing questions. Things like, what else could you tell me about that? What information, if you saw it, would make you change your mind?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or what's the actual evidence that this claim is valid? What procedures were used to vet this information? You have to push past the easy surface answer.
And be wary of placebic information.
Yeah, that's information that feels reassuring, like it addresses your concern, but is actually content-free. Smooth non-answers, basically. Politicians are often masters of this.
Right. Sounds like an answer, but isn't.
And one more critical point. Don't automatically fall in love with new information just because it's new or seems compelling. You have to weigh it appropriately.
Right.
The book mentions a study where giving doctors more information about a patient with chest pain didn't always lead to better diagnoses.
Really? Why not?
Because sometimes the extra information, if not properly scrutinized and weighed against existing knowledge, could actually reinforce a wrong initial hunch or bias. More isn't always better if you're not asking the right questions about it.
Okay, moving on. The next hook is consistency. Our desire for things to be neat, predictable, consistent. Our aversion to noise or random variability. How does that make us vulnerable?
This is huge, especially in finance, but it applies elsewhere too. We just don't like randomness. We prefer smooth, predictable patterns. Ponzi schemes often exploit this brilliantly.
How so? I thought Ponzi's promised huge, flashy returns.
Some do, like BitConnect with its crazy promises, but the really insidious ones, the ones that last for decades like Bernie Madoff's, they exploit our desire for consistency.
Madoff wasn't promising lottery winnings.
No, not really. His hook wasn't unbelievably high returns, it was unbelievably steady returns. He offered maybe 7% to 14% annual growth year after year with very little volatility, very little fluctuation.
Which is actually less than the stock market average over the long run, right?
Often, yes. But professional investors, his clients, love that smoothness. Even when some suspected fraud, the consistency was just too appealing compared to the messy ups and downs of the real market. They preferred the smooth, comforting lie.
Wow. They preferred consistency over potentially higher but noisier real returns.
It speaks volumes about our aversion to uncertainty, which leads to the question the book suggests you should always ask, where is the noise?
You mean,
Meaning, real-world data is almost always noisy, variable. Stock prices jump around, baseball teams win some, lose some, temperatures fluctuate. If you see results that are too smooth, too perfect, too consistent, that should be a red flag.
like that online chess player example, Lazier?
Exactly. This player achieved an accuracy of nearly 94% against top engines, which is suspicious enough. But the bigger tell was the timing of the moves, almost perfectly consistent, unlike human players who think longer on tough moves and play quicker on easy ones.
Humans have variability, noise.
Right. The lack of noise, the excessive consistency, was the giveaway that it likely wasn't human. So, in a weird way, noise should be your friend when you're trying to detect deception. Its absence is suspicious.
Because inconsistency signals a natural, unmanipulated process.
Often, yes. Or at least something less likely to be completely fabricated or rigged. If something looks too perfect, too smooth, it probably means someone is either cooking the books, cherry-picking the data, or presenting a totally unrepresentative picture.
That makes sense. Be skeptical of perfection.
And this idea of consistency links to tells in human behavior, too.
Like poker tells, Teddy KGB and his Oreos and Rounders.
Uh-huh, exactly. Or the book mentions Andre Agassi figuring out Boris Becker's serve.
How?
Becker had this tiny unconscious tell where his tongue flickered just before he served, depended on where he was aiming. Agassi spotted this inconsistency and used it. Identifying and minimizing your own tells, your own predictable patterns, is crucial in competitive situations.
But sometimes consistency is mandatory, like in bridge.
Right, it's fascinating. In competitive bridge, signaling information to your partner through variations in how quickly you make a standard bid is actually illegal. Any hesitation or unusual speed on a routine bid is considered unauthorized information, a break from expected consistency.
So consistency is enforced there to prevent cheating.
Yeah. The takeaway overall is appreciate variability. Understand that real results are messy. Be deeply skeptical of anything that looks too smooth, too consistent, too perfect. Whether it's an investment, a scientific claim, or even a political leader who claims to never change their mind or flip-flop, sometimes a little inconsistency is a sign of authenticity.
All right, next hook. Familiarity. This seems straightforward. We like what we know, what feels familiar. How do manipulators use that against us?
Oh, in so many ways. Familiarity breeds trust, or at least lowers our guard. Politics is a great example with ghost candidates.
Those candidates.
Yeah, these are often spoiler candidates put on the ballot, sometimes funded secretly, who happen to have names very similar to a well-known politician or just a common, familiar-sounding name.
Like Alex Rodriguez in that Florida election. Not the baseball player, obviously.
Exactly. Or years ago, followers of Lyndon LaRouche won Democratic primaries in Illinois, partly because they had simple, familiar-sounding names that voters perhaps recognized or felt comfortable with, even though the candidates themselves weren't well-known or mainstream. Sheer name recognition, that feeling of familiarity, can subtly nudge votes.
Wow, just a name.
And marketing, of course, is the absolute masterclass in using familiarity.
How so?
Think about brand names. Ralph Lauren naming shirts, Hampton, IKEA naming bookcases, Billy. They use familiar, comforting names. Or companies evoking famous figures like the Nikola Truck Company, explicitly using Nikola Tesla's name to borrow his innovative, familiar aura.
Right, instant association.
Or just mimicking trade dress,
Yeah.
the look and feel of a product's packaging. You see store-brand potato chip bags that look suspiciously similar to Ruffles or Lay's, right?
All the time.
That's leveraging familiarity. And sometimes it's just about hammering the brand name itself into our consciousness. The book mentions Infiniti running those abstract ads back in the 80s that barely showed the car.
I remember those. Trees, rocks, very zen.
The goal wasn't to show features. It was purely to build brand familiarity, make the name Infiniti feel known and upscale before the cars even really hit the market. Or 84 Lumber spending millions on a Super Bowl ad that didn't really feature their products.
Why do that?
It's just pure brand awareness. Making the name familiar makes it feel more trustworthy, more legitimate when you encounter it later.
So familiarity can be manufactured
Eh.
and weaponized.
Definitely. The book talks about the same name scam. The mafia used it, setting up companies with names very close to legitimate businesses to fool suppliers. And more recently, the massive 1MDB fraud involving J-Ho Low.
What do you do?
He created shell companies with names designed to sound like major, legitimate financial institutions. Things like Blackstone Asia Real Estate Partners. Sounds like the real Blackstone Group, but wasn't. Or A-Bar Investments PJS Limited, designed to mimic the real Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund called A-Bar Investments PJS.
And people fell for it, sending money to the fake A-Bar.
Billions were diverted that way. Bankers, auditors, supposedly sophisticated people were fooled by the familiar-sounding name. They saw A-Bar and assumed it was the entity they knew. The familiarity provided a veneer of legitimacy.
That's terrifying.
And think about the Sinclair Broadcast Group example.
With the local news anchors.
Yeah, they required their local news anchors, these faces people see every night, faces they trust that feel incredibly familiar, to read identical corporate-mandated editorials, often criticizing fake news from other sources.
Using the anchor's familiarity and credibility.
Exactly. They effectively hijacked the trust viewers had in those familiar faces to push a corporate message. It's weaponizing familiarity and trust.
It all seems to connect to that illusory truth effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Aldous Huxley had that provocative line, 62,400 repetitions make one truth. And research backs this up.
Just hearing something repeatedly makes us think it's true.
It makes us more likely to rate it as true later on, even if we initially knew it was false or had no opinion. Simple repetition increases that feeling of familiarity, and our brain often mistakes familiarity for truth. This is a cornerstone of propaganda and advertising. Think of the movie The Candidate. Robert Redford's character just repeats vague platitudes over and over, and his poll numbers go up.
Because the message becomes familiar.
Familiar and therefore somehow more believable.
So what's the defense here? How do we fight the familiarity bias?
The book suggests actively trying to defamiliarize information sometimes. If you're evaluating a heated political debate, try mentally replacing the candidates' names with candidate A and candidate B, or the countries with country X and country Y.
To strip away the familiar associations and just look at the arguments?
Exactly. Evaluate the merits impartially. And generally, be wary of the trappings of trustworthiness. Things that look familiar and legitimate, but might just be a facade.
Like Theranos having famous generals and politicians on its board.
Perfect example. That created an aura of legitimacy and familiarity, even though the core technology wasn't working. Or seeing a 5-star rating from Morningstar for a mutual fund. It feels familiar and trustworthy, but you still need to look under the hood. Don't let familiarity alone make the decision.
Okay, number 7, hook. Precision. This one feels a bit counterintuitive. Don't we want precision? How can that be a deceptive hook?
Because an unwarranted faith in precise numbers can make claims seem much more authoritative or accurate than they really are. It can short-circuit our critical thinking.
Give me an example.
The book uses Rand Paul talking about a government grant for quail research. He didn't just say it cost a lot, or nearly $1 million. He used the figure $874,503.
That sounds very specific, like he really did his homework.
Exactly. That precision lends it an air of authority. But the book points out 2 things. First, he's exploiting denominator neglect.
Denominator neglect.
Yeah, focusing on this seemingly large, precise number in isolation without comparing it to the relevant denominator, in this case, the total federal science budget, which is massive. Compared to that, 874K is tiny, but presented alone, it sounds scandalous.
So the context is missing.
Right. And second, there's the ironic tell of that level of precision for what is almost certainly an estimated cost over the life of a grant. Getting it down to the exact dollar like that is often a sign of spurious accuracy. Real-world estimates usually involve some rounding.
So excessive precision can actually be suspicious.
They can be, especially when the number itself seems implausible or the context is ignored.
Yeah.
Think about the initial radiation readings at Chernobyl.
What about them?
The first reported reading was 3.6 Roentgen.
Sounds precise, not great, not terrible, as the line goes.
But 3.6 Roentgen was simply the maximum reading the dosimeters they had on hand could measure. The actual level was vastly, catastrophically higher. The precision was dangerously misleading because the instrument was capped.
It gave a false sense of the scale of the disaster?
Completely. Or the UK's COVID-19 dashboard issue. They failed to report nearly 16,000 positive tests at one point.
Why?
Because the process relied on exporting data into an old Excel file format, XLS, which has a row limit of 65,536. Once the number of cases exceeded that limit, the new cases just weren't being added. The precise number reported was wrong because the measurement tool hit its limit.
Again, the precision was masking a failure in measurement?
Exactly. And we see this in some scientific claims, too. The book mentions the famous, now debunked, claim of a critical positivity ratio.
What was that?
It claimed that to flourish psychologically, people needed a ratio of positive to negative experiences of exactly 2.9013 to 1.
That's incredibly precise, 2.9013.
Ridiculously so, especially given the complexity and noisiness of measuring human emotions. Or think about Twitter's past claims of having fewer than 5.00% bots on the platform.
3 significant figures there.
Right, implying a level of measurement accuracy that's almost certainly impossible given the scale and dynamic nature of the platform. Such precision from inherently noisy or small data sets is often mathematically implausible.
It's like the book's analogy of the small telescope.
Yeah. If you look at Saturn through a cheap toy telescope, you might conclude it has no moons because you simply can't resolve them. Your instrument limits your precision. Claiming high precision based on a limited tool or small sample size leads to conclusions that are precisely wrong.
So what should we do when we see these super precise numbers?
Question them, especially if they seem too good to be true or the context seems off. Mentally round them off. Does $874,503 sound that different from about $900,000? Sometimes stripping away the false precision helps you evaluate the claim more realistically. Ask about the source, the methodology. How could they possibly measure it that accurately?
Okay, last hook. Potency. This is about falling for claims that small interventions, small changes, can have massive outsized effects, like a butterfly flapping its wings causing a hurricane.
Exactly. We seem drawn to the idea that simple fixes can lead to huge results, that there's some secret key or shortcut to massive success or change. Deceivers tap right into this desire.
Like old-time snake oil salesmen.
Perfect example. Their remedies promise cures for everything: rheumatism, gout, colic, toothache, even household accidents. One tiny bottle. Immense potency.
And we still see this today, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about some dietary supplements promising radical health transformations or brain training programs like Lumosity that face lawsuits for exaggerating claims about preventing cognitive decline with simple games. The implicit promise is huge potency from a small input.
You always have to ask, what's the active ingredient? Does it even exist?
Right. Is there a plausible mechanism for such a large effect? Often these claims tap into our hopeful myth of untapped potential, that massive improvements are just one simple trick away.
And this pops up in social science research, too, the Be a Voter experiment.
Yes, that's a fascinating case study in the book. An initial, relatively small study found that changing the wording of a survey question slightly, from asking how important it is to vote to asking how important it is to be a voter, dramatically increased actual voter turnout by something like 13.7 percentage points.
Wow, that's a huge effect from just changing a couple of words.
Exactly. Immensely potent. It got a lot of attention.
Yeah,
But then
didn't replicate.
later studies, much larger and more robust, try to replicate it, and they found the effect was basically zero, non-existent. The initial finding was likely a statistical fluke, an overestimation of potency.
So the small intervention didn't actually have that butterfly effect.
No. And this highlights a key principle. Be skeptical of implausibly large effects. The book mentions another study that claimed playing violent video games for just 1 hour caused dramatic increases in aggressive thoughts. A critic pointed out that if the effect were really that potent, you'd easily notice huge behavioral changes in society every time a new Call of Duty game came out. You'd see it in your friends, your students.
But we don't really see that on such a massive scale.
Right. The claimed effect size was just too big compared to the maximal plausible effect you might reasonably expect from that kind of short-term exposure. Real-world effects, especially from small psychological nudges or interventions, are often tiny or zero.
So the takeaway is, if someone promises massive results from minimal effort, cost, or change,
Be very, very skeptical. True potency at that scale is rare. If it sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is.
wow. Okay, so this deep dive has really shown that, look, we are all susceptible to being fooled. It's not about intelligence.
Not at all. It's because deception cleverly exploits these fundamental ways. Our minds work, our cognitive habits like focus, prediction, commitment. And it uses these specific, powerful hooks like efficiency, consistency, familiarity, precision, and potency.
We've covered a lot. Thinking about what's missing, expecting surprises even when things seem right, questioning our own assumptions, asking more questions, appreciating noise and variability, discounting familiarity, being wary of false precision, scrutinizing those claims of huge potency.
It's a lot to keep in mind, and the real challenge always is striking that right balance
Balance between what?
between trusting enough to actually function in the world, to interact with people, do business, learn things, and suspending judgment just enough, being critical enough to recognize potential deception,
Yeah.
especially when the stakes are high.
It's not about becoming a total cynic who trusts nothing.
No, that's paralyzing. It's not about avoiding all deception, which is probably impossible anyway. It's about recognizing when it really matters and knowing when to pause, engage your critical thinking, and maybe ask that one extra question.
That makes sense. Not paranoia, just informed vigilance.
Well put.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your day. Building on this idea of knowing yourself, consider what specific type of fool you might be most susceptible to being. Are you maybe too trusting of authority figures? Do you get easily swayed by things that just feel familiar and comfortable? Or maybe it's those precise numbers that make you drop your guard and nod along?
Knowing your own specific vulnerabilities, your own typical failure modes.
Yeah. Understanding your own predispositions, maybe that's the first real step toward truly being nobody's fool.